You've seen it, right? The coworker who stretches their breaks a little too long, the person using company supplies for their own projects, or maybe even something more serious, like theft. Now, most organizations have one go-to solution for all of this: punishment. But what if we're looking at this all wrong? What if the reason punishment so often falls flat has less to do with the punishment and more to do with the person?
So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll get a handle on just how big of a problem this really is. Then, we'll dive into the usual fix, punishment, and explore why it's so hit or miss. That's going to lead us to a really interesting missing piece of the puzzle: an individual's own self-control. We'll look at a fascinating study that connects all these dots, and then we'll wrap up by figuring out what this all means for you and me in the workplace.
All right, first up, the high cost of misbehavior. Before we can even talk about solutions, we have to understand the scale of the problem. Because this isn't just about little annoyances. This behavior can have a huge, real-world financial impact. To put that into perspective, just get a load of this number. A study back in 2010 found that a whopping 45% of all inventory loss in American retail was because of employee theft. Nearly half. And that's just one industry. So yeah, this is way more than a minor headache for companies. It's a massive financial drain.
So what do we call this stuff? Well, researchers have a name for it: organizational deviance. And this classic definition here sums it up perfectly. It's any voluntary behavior that breaks company rules and ends up hurting the organization or its people. And it covers a huge spectrum, right? From things that seem small, like ducking out early, to much bigger things, like outright stealing.
Okay, so on to our next section. Does punishment actually work? It's a big problem, so how do companies try to stop it? Almost always the answer is punishment. The logic seems pretty simple, right? Make the consequences for breaking the rules bad enough, and people will just stop doing it. This whole idea comes from something called deterrence theory, and it really boils down to two key things.
And that leads us to the big question. What actually stops people? Is it the severity of the punishment, making it incredibly harsh, or is it the certainty, making it absolutely guaranteed that you'll get caught? This is a classic debate, and it's something researchers have been trying to figure out for a long, long time.
So let's break that down. On one side, you have punishment certainty. This is all about the odds. How likely is it that I'm going to get caught and actually face the music? It's all about consistency. Then on the other side, you've got punishment severity. This is about how bad the consequence is. Are we talking a slap on the wrist, a big fine, or are you getting fired on the spot?
Now you would think the answer is simple. More certainty and more severity should mean less bad behavior. But here's the twist. The research on this is all over the place. As this quote points out, study after study has come up with conflicting results, and that's the central mystery we're trying to solve. If punishment is the obvious answer, why doesn't it seem to work consistently?
And this is where our story takes a turn. This inconsistency is exactly what a study in 2015 wanted to figure out. The researchers had this really cool idea. Maybe the problem isn't just about the punishment. Maybe it's also about the person. They thought there was a critical third piece of the puzzle that everyone was missing: a specific personality trait. And that trait is something called self-regulatory efficacy. Now that sounds super technical, I know, but you can just think of it as your internal willpower muscle. It's your own belief in your ability to resist temptation and say no when you're faced with a choice to cut corners or break a rule. Some people just have a stronger muscle for this than others.
So, Section 4, the study's findings. How did they actually test this idea? Well, the researchers went out and surveyed almost 200 employees in Nigeria. They asked them about misbehavior at their jobs, how certain and severe punishments were, and, crucially, they also measured everyone's level of that self-regulatory efficacy. The goal was to see how all these things worked together.
Okay, so first things first, the study confirmed the basics. On their own, all three of these things work just like you'd expect them to. The more certain the punishment, the less bad behavior. The more severe the punishment, again, less bad behavior. And the higher a person's self-control, you guessed it, less bad behavior. So no huge surprises there.
But those simple one-to-one effects, that's not the real story here. The truly groundbreaking part of this study isn't about what these factors do on their own. It's about how they interact with each other. And here it is, the key insight. The power of a guaranteed punishment, while it's not the same for everybody, its effectiveness actually changes depending on an employee's level of that internal willpower.
So, check this out. For employees who already had high self-control, the ones with that strong willpower muscle, knowing they would definitely get caught was a massive deterrent. It was like it supercharged their natural tendency to follow the rules. And that's fascinating, right?
It means the threat of certain punishment works best on the very people who are already the least likely to misbehave in the first place.
And this chart just drives the whole point home. It shows the relative impact each of these things had. I mean, just look at the bar for punishment certainty. It's not just a little bit bigger than the others. It's huge. What this tells us, loud and clear, is that the certainty of getting caught is a much, much more powerful deterrent than how severe the punishment is, or even how much self-control a person has on its own.
So, what are we supposed to do with all of this? How can managers and companies actually use these findings to build a workplace that's a little bit better and a little more honest?
So what's the game plan here? Well, first, it tells us that consistency is way more important than severity. A really harsh penalty that's almost never enforced, it's basically useless. It's far more effective to have a smaller consequence that is absolutely guaranteed to happen. And second, it shows that personality is a huge piece of this puzzle. An employee's own ability to self-regulate matters a lot. Which leads to the study's most interesting suggestion. Maybe companies should start screening for this kind of trait when they're hiring.
And that brings us to our final, pretty provocative question. If this research is right, then one of the best ways to stop bad behavior at work is to hire people who are already good at controlling their impulses. So, should companies start hiring for willpower? Should self-control become a key qualification on a resume? It is definitely something to think about.